Cybertron is one of the only parts of the Transformers franchise that I basically have no awareness of, which I honestly find a little bit of a shame since all the legacy toys look so good. Like, Hotshot looks good, but I've got a Hotshot. Starscream looks spectacular, but he'd just be another one to add to the pile. Even going back as far as Siege with Galaxy Upgrade Optimus. That thing looked great, but I just never went for it. The only one that really appealed to me was Legacy United's Cybertron universe Vector Prime, largely because of the whole Age of the Prime situation that we're about to be going into. And I'll be honest, I've not been this excited about a toy line for a while. You know, from everything we've seen, the new figures of the Primes look absolutely amazing. Star Convoy, Megatronus, Primer, Solus, not one of them looks bad. And this figure seems to be a nice little teaser going into that. So, let's take a look at him. The sculpted detail and proportions on this figure are absolutely immaculate, and very familiar, which is probably because this is a retool of Legacy G-Axis, which, why the hell not, let's cover him quickly. This is a really good looking figure, in some ways. I mean, it's ugly, it's hideous as sin, but that's kind of the point. This is a very accurate representation of a G2 comic-only character, meaning you got techno guts in the shins, you got these bat details all over him, you got one of the worst, least coherent color palettes in history, but it all comes together into one hideous mass with really, really solid, like, heroic proportions. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, but I love it. You know, he's really stocky and tall and broad, the big hands are really cool, the shins are definitely a feature with their little batwing ankles. He's got a chest that basically reads as what if a Seeker cockpit took steroids, and then a few of the little details like the rounded thighs, the big boxy forearms, the huge shoulders, that weird squished up face, and the little radar thingy next to it. I don't know what it is, but it's cool. A lot of asymmetry around the head, actually. You know, this is just one of those molds where the proportions tie it together into something really, really coherent, and that beautifully carries over into Vector Prime. You know, for a figure that basically only changes the chest, head, shoulders, wings, and dick, this manages to look strikingly like the original show model. This version is a little bit lankier, but he's still built like a brute. Those forearms and shins do wonders for the design. Out of all of him, the thighs are probably the least accurate part of the design, just keeping the very rounded ones from G-Axis. You know, the shape is pretty close, but he doesn't have those big squares. You could argue that he needs a little bit more of that swirly mystical detail, but I'm fine with the amount that he has. It's present on the crotch and the shoulder pads, and it's sculpted really, really nicely. But the chest and head, those are the real home run here. That little circle thingy that he has in his torso, mwah, chef's kiss. And the head sculpt is absolutely beautiful, with the pissed off old man face recessed into that regal helmet. Just nails the look. And if this isn't quite regal and grandiose enough for you, then don't worry, DNA has you covered. Jesus Christ. Ah, that looks awesome. One thing that's been done here that I think really, really works is bringing up the vibrance of the colours a little more. I'll admit the grey is a little bit Games Workshop-y, but it kind of works here alongside the secondary hose? It kind of works here alongside the secondary hues. The burgundy, the gold, and the metallic blue have got way more life than they did in that original animation model, and it makes this guy so much more vibrant. As far as I understand in the show, he was an older character, but this looks like Vector in his prime. Yes, the pun was very much intentional. Get f***ed. But yeah, I love the colours. They just work really, really well. Especially the translucent blue with the little metallic flecks in it, just, oh, that works well. Love it. Honestly, as much as this mold was designed with G-Axis in mind, I think it works way better for Vector Prime. He's just so much more dynamic looking. There is just one part where I don't really think it works, and that's the shins. Not particularly the detail on them, but the fact that they haven't removed the clips that used to have the little bat wings on. These are really, really ugly, unfortunately. But when that's the extent of my complaints about the look of a figure, it's doing something right. Now, accessory-wise, Vector Prime and G-Axis are very, very different. G-Axis comes with two guns. They're both modeled after the same blaster from the comic, which is actually Optimus's blaster. The larger red one is a lot more proportional and a lot better feeling in hand for the figure. You can also unplug that little shoulder thingy and stick it on the back, just gives it an extra little bit of presence. The little clear one, however, is a little bit shit. You do have a little bit of paint on it, which is nice, but it's completely flat. I tend to just stick it on the arm or just ignore it altogether. The accessories here are nothing special. I suppose the red gun's alright, it's got a nice sculpt to it, but Vector Prime, in terms of accessories, he's definitely winning. He has a broadsword, which is just big and beautiful. It's mostly made of clear plastic with an opaque handle hinged on separately, which is a nice touch, and it just looks really good in his hands. You also get the planet key. It's really well sculpted, although I do think that the clear plastic nullifies the sculpt a bit, makes it look a little soft, but it does have a neat aesthetic to it. You can plug it onto the sword if you want to, which looks pretty good, but I think my preferred thing is plugging it here onto the chest. It does cover up that nice bit of sculpting, but it gives him this really cool core effect. Finally, you have a little play feature with the wings. These can pretty easily pop off the posts that they're on, and then there's a little port so you can plug them onto the forearms as a pair of shields. I love this look. It makes the silhouette look that much more dynamic, mostly because you can't really see the wings from the front when they're plugged on the back. But yeah, when paired with the sword, this looks really cool. But the big thing that makes the sword and shield combo work so well is how well the figure can pose with them. The head is on a decent ball joint with some good ranges. The shoulders are on a joint that's mounted inside the torso, which does limit them a little bit, but it's not the worst version of this joint that I've seen, and they can still go all the way around with ease. There's bicep swivels, really deep elbows, wrist swivels, opening hands, a waist swivel. The hips go out pretty standardly, and they don't go back that far, but they go forward really far. You have thigh swivels, really deep knees, and then the feet can point up and down and tilt. The posing here is really good. On both figures, they are identical in terms of posing. The only key difference is the wings. Jaxus's wings are pretty much stationary, whereas Vector Prime's, because of the way that they droop, they do kinda get in the way a little bit. You can move them out of the way, but only up and down. It's not a major issue, but it does sometimes get in the way. But overall, I do think that Vector Prime's posing works a little bit better. Having all the ranges that he has alongside the opening hands work really well for a sword-wielding character, or one that has an accessory that doesn't actually have a peg to hold in hand. But the major advantage that Vector Prime has is that he is built a lot better than my copy of Giaxus is. Now, my Vector isn't exactly perfect, the hips do have a little bit of wiggle room to them, but across the board he is mostly pretty solid. Giaxus, however, needed to have multiple rounds of superglue and kikis before he could actually stand up on his own. Both of the shoulders, one of the elbows, one of the thigh swivels, both of the hips, both of the knees, they were just floppy as all hell, and I was never able to fix one of the knees and thigh swivels properly. It was easily my biggest problem with Giaxus, and I don't know how big of a widespread issue it was, but it did sour me on the figure quite a lot. But I am glad that Vector is built so much better. Once again, he's not perfect, but he is satisfying to mess with, and that does thankfully continue into the transformation. Now, this is a pretty simple one step at a time conversion. It's very much a point A to point B affair. It's not one that I find myself doing just for fun. You know, getting the torso opened up and flipped around is probably the most interesting part, and the rest of it is just maneuvering the limbs around themselves and plugging it all together. Although I do like the little struts for the wings expanding out and clipping on the back. And when you get them done, I must admit, Vector Prime wears this alt mode a lot better than Giaxus does. This is easily the most rectangular spaceship I've ever seen in my life, and you know, that does work for Vector. The rear end may be a little bit plain and messy, but the wings on the sides do really well to cover that up and draw your eyes away, and the front half is just gorgeous. It's covered in all that decadent sculpting I wish there was more of in the robot mode, all gears and the sword detail coming through. You can even plug the cyber key on top to give it a little bit more of an interesting look. And the main drawback is just the arms plonked on underneath, but it kinda works for the look of this version of the mold. It does not work, however, for Giaxus, which is a much sleeker, more aerodynamic jet plane looking thing. You know, I do actually have a lot of love for this design. I love the back end with the techno babble on the shins and the bat wings coming off the sides. The front half with the cockpit, at least from a top view, looks alright, but once you start looking at it from the side, hell no. The arms underneath are so much more apparently just a block. The bottom of the cockpit is completely empty, and it just doesn't look good. Combine that with seeing a whole bunch of the, I wouldn't even call it yellowing, more the greening that you see on Giaxus on this side. Yeah, it's not great. Combine all that with the fact that the arms on the bottom are blocking the stand port, so you just have to plonk these things on the ground. Yeah, I have problems with it. Overall, I think Giaxus was a good pickup, but probably only at the discounted price that I got him. He was around 20 quid at the time. But I don't know, those tolerances just, they rubbed me the wrong way. Build quality is a be-all and end-all for me. Unfortunately, everything that Giaxus did wrong, I like an awful lot better on Vector Prime. I would definitely recommend this figure, especially if you're going into Age of the Primes with the intention of buying all the Primes. Especially considering I don't actually know if we're getting a Vector Prime in that line. Well, we might be. If you know, then please leave it down in the comments. If you enjoyed the video, then feel free to leave a like, it helps a lot. And be sure to subscribe for the next one. Or hell, maybe if you feel like giving me some extra support, then check it out on my Patreon. It's already live. But either way, hope I see you all soon. I have recorded this whole review with my second monitor having the DNA kit showing up, and I am so tempted by it. Get this video to like 500 likes and I'll buy it. Yeah, alright, ciao.